very first live streaming of Freedom Radio. And today, I thought usually I script things a little bit, but today, not so much. We'll be having a couple guests entering the studio in just a moment. But I really thought that today we'd be able to talk about what matters most to us. In thinking about what matters to Ironwill, to Freedom Radio, we just had to kind of figure out what are those things that are most necessary for our community, which we define as a working ecosystem that can pretty much make sure that everyone is moving along a path that their passions either guide them or that everyone is working together in a way that we're fueling each other's passions and we're ensuring each other's success and we're tapping into the resources that each individual has. So everybody has something we can, there's something we can learn from each and every person. And so I thought, hey, why not talk a little bit more about this? Why not talk a little bit more about why Iron Will was created, why Freedom Radio is here to have these kind of discussions. So if I kind of consider those things that matter most to Iron Will. So we're at Iron Will is an educational consulting company. We're looking to make sure that we're infusing engineering education into everything that we do. And so we want to make sure that all those multifaceted kind of parts in order to find a solution, all those multiple pieces, and my daughters are watching. So multifaceted is fancy. It's fancy for having multiple parts. Okay, so having a bunch of different parts. And in our communities, trying to find a solution has multiple parts. There's a lot to it, and it takes every single person in the community to be able to address all those needs that we have. And so in engineering and in and globally, there are grand challenges that are needed to be addressed. And so we kind of set forth a few of our personal or community grand challenges, and we'll talk about those in a bit. But we want to make sure that we're paying the bills, right? So we want to give those, shout outs and make sure that we're letting you know that Freedom Radio is brought to you in part by the Transformational Leadership Conference, the 2014 Iron Sharpens Iron Tour. This is where you only get the information for the 2014 Iron Sharpens Iron Tour here on Freedom Radio, the hardware store. So we're streaming live. Very first time from a Work Hard Pittsburgh here in the wonderful town of Allentown. So wonderful neighborhood, Pittsburgh neighborhood of Allentown. And these are the kind of regions that we want to touch. I'm from Northampton County, Northampton County, North Carolina, and very rural town. And we're always trying to really connect with folks that need it the most, figuring out what kind of resources and things that we typically can't get access to, but how can we make those things more readily accessible? Because everybody deserves to have the same kind of access to high quality programming, but we don't always have those opportunities. So without further ado, making sure that we let you know that Freedom Youth Initiative, Iron Will, and let's see who else. Freedom Youth Initiative, Transformational Leadership Conference, Freedom Consulting, Freedom Initiative Pittsburgh, and I think I pretty much covered them all. So let's see. Today we have Jordan Littman. So I'm going to change. You can't see yourself. You're on the other one. So we might have to adjust the camera because you're taller. So I'm going to just, or maybe see if you slide over to that. If you slide over to that one. Let's see if that works better. Oh my goodness! So Dr. Lippman is has become a really good friend of mine, and is the founder of Interactive Story
Am I
Adventures.
in the camera?
Yes, you're in the camera now.
Okay. Do we need to adjust
do you
it at
want to do you want to adjust it?
I don't know what it looks like.
Okay, that's
I
good.
think it's looking at me. Hi, Freedom Radio.
Oh my goodness, he is hilarious, but he's also dedicated to ensuring that we have high quality programming for everyone. And so, Interactive Story Adventures, awesome program that I probably couldn't even give a real a perfect description of, and he'll probably do better.
I'll try.
Yes. So, how about I let you do that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, a little bit about myself. I grew up in New Jersey, in Tenafly, New Jersey, and I grew up with learning disabilities and ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and school was always a struggle for me. And I would do anything possible to get out of going to school up until, I guess, the last year of my high school years. I always worked harder than everybody else, but it was just such a struggle. And it's kind of ironic that I went on to get my PhD because I just hated school so much and avoided it at all costs. But essentially, I was in high school. I was part of this. I went to Dwight Englewood School in Englewood, New Jersey, Englewood, New Jersey, and I was part of a focus program that allowed me to do independent study, and I ended up winning an award for that work, and that was my first real academic success. And Mary, my lead educator, is joining us. Hi, Mary.
Hi.
Welcome.
Thanks.
So that was my first academic success. In college, I organized I went to Union College in Schenectady, New York, which is a small private school, and it had small classes, as did my high school. And that allowed me to kind of excel because I didn't interact with professors. And I did I started doing more independent research at that point, but I was told by my research methods professor that I was kind of thinking about grad school, and he's like, I don't think grad school is for you because of my attention issues. ADHD, for those of you who don't know, it's not that you can't pay attention, it's that you have trouble regulating what you pay attention to. So you come off as sometimes being impulsive, as being inattentive, and as not being serious as a student. But I was very serious, it just came off differently. And so he didn't think grad school was great for me. And at that point I decided I definitely was going to grad school and I was getting a PhD no matter what. And I did. I successfully defended my dissertation in 2011. I went to the University of Illinois, Chicago. I studied with Susan Goldman and Jim Pellegrino there. And they are in the learning sciences, and my degree is in learning sciences and cognitive psychology. My expertise is in designing and evaluating learning environments, both digital and in-person learning environments. And after my PhD, I went to, my wife got a fellowship here in Pittsburgh for, she's an oncologist. She works for, the fellowship was with the Allegheny General Hospital. And so I was here in Pittsburgh, and I started hanging out over at CMU in David Clark's lab. He does amazing work on early childhood. Actually, so where your emphasis is engineering, his emphasis is scientific reasoning. So my emphasis in my dissertation was on scientific reasoning of adults. I worked with him and a little bit learned more about scientific reasoning in elementary school students. And from there, I got a postdoc with Chris Shun over at the University of Pittsburgh. He's at the Learning Research and Development Center with LRDC, which has a long history in the field of education. It's really an amazing institution. And towards the end of I was there for a couple of years working on designing digital resources to help undergraduates learn how to think scientifically. I started to get frustrated with day in and day out doing the tasks that were kind of most challenging for my particular learning difficulties or differences. And I decided I love working in groups. I want to, and not only So rather than working alone on a paper that 7 people will read, I realized I wanted to kind of get out in the field and create learning experiences and see the impact of them right away. And I at the same time I had kids, and so I started getting interested in more developmental issues. And so right around that time is when I started Interactive Story Adventures. Previously, as I was starting to wind up my academic career, I started a different company called Name Games, and we created an iPad app called Pick2's Name Games. And it's the reason I started is because my kids don't really, at that time, didn't really know my relatives. They were around 1 and 2 years old, and I grew up in a tight-knit Jewish family in northern New Jersey where we saw everybody all the time. And here in Pittsburgh, our families in Chicago and in New York, they don't really know my family members. So I created this app where where young kids can learn the names and faces of their family members. So that was my first business experience. And then I started Interactive Story Adventures really to create educational programming, high quality educational programming that focuses on engineering education, scientific inquiry education, and incorporates storytelling or uses story as the grounding way to communicate and to engage children in various activities that emphasize those skills. So story is really the avenue by which we do that, and we incorporate digital technologies such as name games into our programs. And our programming then focuses on STEAM skills, which is science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, as well as social skills. And that's our 2 main emphases.
Perfect. Wonderful. So Mary, you're here now.
Yes, I made it.
I'm excited. So Mary here works with Jordan for the Interactive Story Adventures. She's the lead educator. Yes. And I have a secret. I work with Interactive Story Adventures too. So I've had so much fun working alongside with Mary and Jordan and really trying to, just put together a program that really engages students and considers students very much like, that may have similar backgrounds to Jordan, that
Yep.
may have, special learning needs that we want to be able to address, because everyone deserves high quality program no matter what. We need to be able to make sure that we're tailoring to that. And so that's why we have the lovely Miss Mary Arena. Did I pronounce your last
Yes,
name
you
right?
did.
I did. So tell us a little bit more about your background, because we know that in addition to being a wonderful mommy, with with a wonderful little 18-month-old.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
She's so cute.
She's a cutie pie and has a huge vocabulary list. So I don't know if you want to figure out, I don't know, like I think Miss Mary apparently is, her baby can definitely read. You know what I mean? And she
knows yesterday she was telling us all the colors.
Oh, nice.
At 18 months to already know colors.
Yep, big deal.
Yeah.
Real big deal. But tell us a little bit about your background, how you became such a wonderful educator.
Okay, well, I guess I'll start with, I did my undergrad.
Yeah, and me too. So scan it back that way. He's going to control Jordan's going to control the cameras at this point.
Is she in the shot?
Yeah, she is.
Okay,
It's a
good.
little blurry now. Hold on. Let's see.
Uh-oh.
I didn't know I was on camera.
Yeah, you were on the whole
We're streaming
time.
live.
Streaming live.
Oh my goodness.
So, well, I will start with undergrad. I went to Loyola College in Maryland, and I studied elementary education there. And then following that, I returned home to Buffalo, where I'm from, and I began teaching. And while I had my first teaching job, I was also getting my master's degree as a literacy specialist at the University of Buffalo. And then, let's see, from there I continued teaching. I've been an elementary education teacher in kindergarten, first grade, and second grade for just shy of 10 years. And then I moved to Pittsburgh about a year ago, and that's when I found Jordan. Well, not that long ago, but I found Jordan somewhat more recently. And, with an 18-month-old, I wasn't quite ready to go back full-time teaching, so finding Jordan was kind of perfect for me because it still let me do what I love while having a little bit more flexibility with being home with my daughter. So
Awesome. Awesome. So And when we're thinking about, again, education, and I have to adjust this camera.
Because I messed it up.
Yes, you did, but that's okay. We can make quick adjustments.
Here,
It's perfect now. You don't even have to move.
Okay.
Yeah, we got it. We got the shot so that everybody's in it. Okay. All right. So, in thinking about education, because I want to have, we've had this conversation before, just thinking about what matters in terms of education, what matters in terms of delivering kind of high quality programming. When you think about the kinds of communities that you want to be working with,
oh yeah,
how do you think about connecting with them, or what experience do you have in connecting with different communities that kind of shows the versatility of your purpose and interactive story adventures? Do you want to address that a bit?
So one thing that we really value is paying attention to individual, I'm using a jargon term, individual differences, but what that means is paying attention to each individual learner and that learner's strengths and weaknesses. And so we really value the opportunity to work with kids on the autism spectrum. We find that our programming is engaging but also sensitive to their needs. Mm-hmm. At the same time, we really value working in urban environments and in places that don't necessarily have access to the high quality early childhood educational programming. So for example, there was a recent study that we found out through I don't actually remember the department that did it, so I don't want to misquote, but Pittsburgh is one of the areas in the country that has the least access to high quality early childhood educational programming in the entire country, and that's one of the reasons we recently got this very large $30 million grant that's going to the East Liberty and Larimer communities.
Right.
And so we've been working with the Kingsley Association and also the East Liberty Development Incorporation, who manages the Liberty Gardens housing project, which is one of the last housing projects in the city. Mm-hmm. And we've had such amazing experiences there. One thing that we do as a company is we consider education a 360-degree experience. Mm-hmm. So we like to provide in-class programming or in-person programming, as well as digital programming that extends learning at home for parents who have cell phones. They can access it. But we also like to do community events. So we've run a couple of different community events. We were in the Sprout Fund's tent at the Children's Festival, and we participated in the City of Play big play date on Shenley Plaza. But we also were part of the opening of the Family Resource Center at Liberty Gardens, and we have a couple different types of events. One of them is the community events we call villages, and we call our main programs, I guess programs right now, but we haven't really come up with a good name for it. But we did something called Funville at Liberty Gardens, where we had kids acting like mini engineers. They were building structures, and we were talking about how do you create a sturdy structure versus a less sturdy structure. And they dressed up like in construction hats, and they built stuff, and then they were silly monsters. They put on these costumes, and then they got to knock them down. So then we also talked about that we had a variety of objects they could toss at these structures and knock them down. We talked about which type of object you think is going to have the most impact. So there's a couple different ways to engage kids in inquiry and in scientific reasoning, as well as in design inquiry, but it's all fun. And we found that the kids responded so positively to that experience. There were some kids that went 4, 5, 6, 7 times through the experience. They just loved it.
Nice.
And it was nice to have a chance to engage in a deep way with kids, not just in a community setting, which was, and they seemed to really respond to what we were doing, because not only it's semi-structured, mm-hmm. It's fun, but there's a purpose. And at the end, they walk away, like one girl who's like 3, we set up 2 different structures that were the same, except for this little difference that one of them had a better base. Mm. And she tossed some balls at it, and she saw, well, one of them stayed longer. It like sunk in. Yeah. And awesome. Connecting with her was a very powerful, moving experience for me.
Cool. Well, in thinking about, engineering education and thinking about You know, the topic of today's session is like what matters most, what matters to you the most. And so we kind of came up with a list, and it's funny that, you know, we're talking about early education, early childhood education, because my first question in engineering design, the first part of the engineering design process is to ask. If we're talking about on the elementary level, we simplify it. We say the first is ask, and then we imagine, because we're thinking through things and figuring out and using history to kind of guide our thinking. And then we're planning, we create, and then we improve on whatever it is that we create. And that's the engineering design process. But realistically, you know, as I've mentioned before, engineering design and the NAE, so they have set forth NAE, so National Association of Engineers. So they have put forth grand challenges for education. There's global grand challenges. We want to make sure we can have, you know, we can do space travel effectively. We want to make sure we have clean water for everybody that's accessible. These are the kind of things that go on, you know, the kind of grand challenges. So I came up with some in my first question, because I wanted to ask a question, because the idea was that, can we identify those things that, you know, that matter to, of course, to Iernwill the most, because we want to address those things, and do those things matter to the community? And in our conversation, in just these short few minutes, early education has come into play, because that's what we do, that's what we love. And if you're just tuning in, we're here with ISA. We have Dr. Jordan Littman and Miss Mary Arena from Interactive Story Adventures. And so the first question that I have for my community grand challenges is, how do we practically, or what solutions do we provide to have, you know, well designed early education literacy? And so these are the kind of programs that we can, you know, interactive story adventures are the kind of, you know, is the kind of program that we can use to make sure that we're addressing those. A couple of those other questions, I'm going to run through them and we can see how they go. Okay, so how do we infuse the arts into all subject areas for engagement? Because I think infusing the arts can engage students in ways that we don't always know how to. The next question, how do we make matters of the environment a concern and an opportunity for growth? So one of my first, and so this is the first live streaming, but just last Freedom Radio segment, I was able to chat with Land Art Generator. And so we talked about those kind of initiatives that they have available and what they're able to do through their programming and connecting it to the environment and education. So to what degree of technology infusion is practical for schools with tight budgets? So without missing out on the skills necessary for global and local competition, because realistically, that's a big deal.
That is a challenge. So one thing that so I want to respond to what matters.
Yes,
okay.
Go ahead.
So those are three questions. What matters? I have a beef to pick with traditional story time. Mm-hmm. I think it's extremely valuable, and it should be part of all kids' experiences, because being exposed to books is important. Mm-hmm. Now, there is a dilemma in our modern day, because books are becoming less popular, and now a lot of people read on digital devices.
Right.
So, but the issue is, when when a little kid plays with a digital device, they're not going to go to books. They're going to go to the games or to the videos. So it takes parents' purposeful kind of direction of guiding their kids to books. And I still value print books, because I think they're engaging and they're physical. Kids hold them and they love turning pages.
Yeah.
Like, there is something really important about that. And getting books in front of kids is really important, I think. But also it's important to expose them to purposeful use of technology. Not just a babysitter. Now, a babysitter is important sometimes.
Right.
I know, believe me. But my kids' their favorite movie is Cinderella and Frozen, and we've watched both of them 7 million times. But it's important to expose kids to the use of technology for purposes. So, for example, like the use of cameras digital devices
Yes.
is a very good way to get kids early on exposed to the utility of technology.
Absolutely.
And that digital literacy, I think, starts with cameras on phones.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's like one of the ways to kind of begin that discussion about what is technology useful for.
Absolutely.
Okay, in terms of arts,
Yes.
there's a big movement towards STEAM, which
Right.
is STEM plus arts.
Yes.
And we believe strongly in the use of arts, but it has to be done purposefully. So I've seen some programs out there that just mash together art and science or art and math without a real purposeful design.
Yes.
And it just, that's a phenomenon, that's a big word. There's a something happens when kids are exposed, or even adults are exposed to distracting but engaging, like very rich media in a learning context. Those videos, pictures, diagrams can either improve learning and add to it or distract from it.
Yes.
When arts is not used in a purposeful way, I think it distracts from learning rather than adding to learning. Like there has to be the goals of the artistic activity and the goals of the kind of other learning goals have to be aligned in a purposeful way. And that's what we spend a lot of time thinking through how to do that. And moving to your next question about technology, and then I'll pass it to Mary. One thing that we do, which we value, is we incorporate technology developed by others and by ourselves into our programming so that schools that couldn't pay for that technology get access to it through us. So, for example, there's a local company, a company that started locally called Origami Robotics that developed a tool, a robot called Romibo. And Romibo is what's called a Wizard of Oz technology, meaning that there's a woman, or because Mary is the woman, there's a woman behind the mask, and Mary has an iPad, and it's programmed, and she presses buttons, and that leads the robot to talk and engage. So we've used it both with kids with autism, but also for typically achieving kids, and both groups have responded really well to it.
Yeah.
And that's an example of how we've taken other people's technology and incorporated it into our programming and provided access to kids who wouldn't have access to that otherwise.
Absolutely. That's true.
And Mary, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
About Romibo?
Yeah, talk about Romibo. We call it Romy.
Yes.
Romy the robot.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm still getting to know Romy very well. It was definitely a challenge at first for me to control it, but and it is different in every situation. It's different with every child. It's different. You're not sure how they're going to respond. So we learned that having things programmed and buttons ready was a very important aspect of running Romy. But it is interesting to see, like Jordan was saying, we used it in 2 different settings. And when we used it with children with autism, not all of them, were really engaged,
Yeah.
but the ones that were did not want to leave the robot.
Right.
So you can see that there is real benefit. Again, depending, and it's like anything, with every child it's different, but depending on the type of child, it certainly was very valuable for some children. And I think that had we had more time with those, we could have really done a lot using the robot, which was really cool. And then, again, with the typical achieving students, some of them...
Well, just backing up 1 second.
Yeah.
So what we tried to do with the robot, if I remember correctly, is kids with autism or on the spectrum sometimes have trouble with social interactions. And because this robot is a social robot, they're kind of tricked into engaging in social interactions. So you can use the robot as a tool to engage them in kind of some of the social activities that they wouldn't necessarily engage with otherwise.
Right. And some that were more nonverbal.
Yeah.
We did use Romy to ask them questions. It wasn't that they couldn't understand. So I think I used a few times. I said, "Can you show me how to wave?" And they would wave. they wouldn't verbally respond, but they certainly interacted in a way that was just, they were able to show some of the things that we did, and they were able to show what they could do without having to use words, and without having to interact with the person. So that was really.
It lowered the stress or something. I don't know if it's stress, but they lowered the barrier to social interaction.
Absolutely. And so, as you've addressed that, there's clearly a usage for technology in a classroom, and I think it's really important to identify those things, because coming from a rural area, Northampton County, and hey to anybody whoever just signed in, I wanted to make sure that as a former educator and as someone that's interested in it and making sure that people have resources, I wanted to make sure that they that we're using things efficiently. Our budgets don't go on forever, and we're really limited to the kind of money we have to invest in particular technologies. And so trying to figure out what usage of technology is best, and also how we can infuse arts to make sure that students have a connection to what they're doing. Because I think one thing about engineering, and one thing about and why I'm such my platform is Engineering Education for All, is because that design component, that ability to create something with your own hands, having the opportunity to really see your learning go to work and really have the kind of outcome of something that's working, that's positive, I think is necessary for students. And I think, as one of the things you brought up in use of technology, my daughter Jordan, she just absolutely loves using cameras. And so they had little cameras, the foolproof ones that if you drop them they don't break and bounce and things like that. And so she really enjoyed those. And then so she became her own newscaster from time to time, and then the integration.
Did you have her do a blog, or
we didn't? It was just we would just sit there, and we'd either turn on the video the webcam, and it would be good day watching news, and that would and that would pretty much be that. And so if she's watching, she's probably like, "Mommy's talking about me." But those are the things where integration of the arts is really, really powerful. And then for my oldest daughter Jaden, she enjoys dancing, and we had her go to the Alloy Studio because they have awesome classes for like $5. The little toddlers on Saturdays. They have awesome classes, some awesome, awesome instructors. They work closely with the kids, and Alloy Studios also trying to give opportunities for those who typically wouldn't have access to that type of the arts, contemporary ballet. And so she got a chance to do those things and separate from mommy a bit, and that kind of provided a means of confidence boost. And I think arts does that for a lot of the students. So before we go too far though, so we've addressed a few of those things. Environment, that was the other one, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think there's meaningful ways that have been done previously with, again, video and the arts, connecting to the landscape and showing kids, okay, this is what's happening to my area. This is my neighborhood. And especially for post-industrial areas like where the hardware store, where we're streaming live from, is here in Allentown, the Allentown neighborhood of Pittsburgh. It's necessary for those post-industrial regions and for those rural areas for people to be able to connect to the landscape and say, hey, this is what's happening here. We could use some help here potentially, or this isn't a neighborhood to forget about. We were here, but we've been, we had our industrial era, but we're still useful. We can have awesome, setups like the hardware store to kind of, be a part of the landscape and the environment, not just green, but the community environment. So, but let's see, what's some other ones? So we talked about the degree of technology infusion and how practical that is. So how do we embed wellness into the way we educate and train the most highly effective educators? So I don't know how connected to wellness and fitness either of you are, but how do we do that in a way, and again, wellness in the broadest sense of the word. What ways can we engage the small business owners in the education of our students, kind of like yourself? What practical applications can be applied to reducing, and so this kind of goes into when we think about parent engagement, so reducing reincarceration, recidivism. So this idea of, a lot of what the interactions, especially in those marginalized communities that you're looking to touch, some of the more urban, and I mean everywhere, there's cases where parents may be in jail, kids may be in with grandparents. And so we're trying to figure out what's a real idea of parent engagement, and what does that look like, and what if the cases are, parent happens to be incarcerated. So kind of considering all those parts. Who is willing to be a part of an education cabinet or transformational leadership alliance? So this is kind of my petition to everyone out there that's listening, and those that'll be able to listen later, to say, what do you have? What is your passions, and what are you willing to share to kind of make the experience for the next person, a younger person, your neighbor, a little bit easier based on just your knowledge base? How do we share that? How do we share that more openly? How do we share that more effectively? How do we get in places where we can have these kind of conversations and say, hey, there's a lot of tough stuff going on. How do we address it? Let's see. How do we address brain drain? So the idea that while Pittsburgh's a college town, we also ended up sending a lot of the college graduates somewhere else. And I think for me, it starts early. Again, having those conversations early with people saying, hey, you are valuable, your knowledge is valuable, our region is valuable. We love Pittsburgh, we're trying to definitely make it the most livable city, right? How can we make sure that we're doing those kind of things that kind of ensure that we're having this sense of regionalism that keeps people here and keeps them from leaving the area. And I'll finish my last one before you jump in. And then where are the educators that are invested in seeing students build confidence through hands-on activities? I really feel as if a lot of it is going. I had the fortune, I was able to talk to some wonderful women at the Consortium for Public Education, and what I was able to find out was that they are really interested in trying to figure out what are the practical ways to have hands-on experiences to really get kids thinking critically, but not just we use those buzzwords all the time, critical thinking, and we never really know what they mean. Critical thinking. It's like, but that's what we do on a regular basis. Your brain is the most, the oldest engineer we know, seriously, from beginning to end when it comes to solving a problem. And actually, I learned that from the book that Jordan bought. Jordan bought me this book, Getting Things Done, right? So the David Allen Getting Things Done guy.
Are you a convert now?
I almost. I've only gotten through half of the book.
Okay.
But what he's been able to show is that everything that his process suggests is exactly in line with engineering education, and the way that we think about defining a problem first, figuring out what possible solutions there are, planning based on, getting it all out. Usually we consider that the brainstorming process, right, where we just get it all out on paper. Quantity is better than quality, but we'll reorganize it later. And then, goes into the other steps where you're figuring out and whatever works, you can come up with an outcome and you improve it accordingly. So, again, this idea of, how do we build confidence, use what we know to create what we don't know.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
About that? Your question.
Yes.
So you had a question about the hands-on education. No, who are we talking about?
So that's the thing. I mean, when I think of learners, I'm thinking of everyone. So anyone that's interested in learning more, right? I think we always learn better through actively. So by doing. And so, when I say hands-on, I'm thinking, how do we, and realistically, it would be the ideal situation, I think, would be that we're taking every person that can ever get a chance to listen to this podcast and say, hey, whether you're a carpenter or a coder or an educator or a street sweeper. There are some skills, either trade or blue collar or traditional kind of learning skills that you have that we could be sharing with someone else. And would you be able to either help someone with that? What I ran into when I always ask, if I see somebody working, there was a neighbor was moving out and his dad was just hanging around, and I just thought I'd spark up a conversation. And he was like, I've been doing carpentry my whole life, roofing. He told me the scale of the roof. I think it was like a 10 by 20. He asked me if I knew. I didn't know anything he was talking about, but he was able to pass on information that quickly. But because he was getting older and arthritis was setting in, he wanted to be able to still have a connection to the carpentry kind of field and things, but he wasn't going to be able to do it himself. And so I asked, would you be interested in education? He's like, I never thought about that. So for any of you out there that haven't thought about education, now's the time. Think about education. You might not be doing this work forever. You might soon be retiring, but I think we definitely need your expertise in trying to, figure this stuff out. So that's what I mean by hands-on. Who can we connect with to make sure that people have those opportunities where they're digging in, immersed in the work that they're learning to be able to do? How do we address mental illness? So in talking about marginalized populations for their success or anybody else's success. And I think when we talk about mental illness, we're already talking about marginalized populations for the most part. I think a lot of times we end up, whether we know it or not, we're either they're either we have folks that are brushed off, their needs aren't being met, those kind of things happen. And a lot of times we also have folks that just think that this is something that we deal with ourselves, we don't have to address those kind of things. And so how do we kind of integrate that into the work that we do, or the push that we have for the communities that we're working with? And what are you willing to do right now? That's the last question, so what are we going to do right away? Like, is there anything to do right away? So that was a ton of questions. I wanted to get them out there just so we can discuss any of those.
Well, I'm going to do a little plug. There's a friend of mine, Zach Block, he's the local director of the Save the World, or Repair the World. Is that it?
I'm not sure. Repair the World? Is that?
Uh-oh.
Wait.
Bad plug.
Should I Google it now?
Yeah, Google it. Well, so his organization, it connects, it helps nonprofits build their capacity to do their work by connecting volunteers based on the volunteers' interests, to nonprofits across the city. So one way to get involved is, to connect with you, but also there's this. Is it Repair the World?
Yes, it is. I was
right.
Yes.
So Repair the World is a good way to get, if you're interested in volunteering, that's one way to get involved and to be connected with an organization that might need your help, that is doing stuff that you're interested in. Mm-hmm. So
absolutely cool. Well, that's awesome. Any thoughts, Mary?
Yeah, I have two quick things that, as you're going through your questions, that stuck out in my mind. First of all, the one you were saying, like, it hit me when you're saying how, critical thinking and how Everett is like, what is that? And like, there's so many things that I think people don't realize that they are already doing. Like, you hear all these fancy terms and things like that. And even as an educator, I remember, however many professional development meetings we'd have, and they'd come in, and now with the big push for STEAM, and you're sitting there as a teacher thinking, I've got my standards, now I've got to do this, and I've got to do this, and they're telling me I need this. But if you look at what you're doing on a daily basis, you're really already doing a lot of it. It's just putting kind of fancy words to it. So, like, in that sense, I think, a lot of educators, a lot of parents, just a lot of people in general are already doing these things. And sometimes it's overwhelming, or even you get a little bit, like, it's, pressure when you hear these things. Oh, you should be doing critical thinking, you should be doing STEAM practices, you should be doing this, and you're like, oh my God, I don't know any of that. But
right.
If you just take a step back and think, okay, well, wait a minute, I ask questions,
Definitely.
So in a sense, we're doing a lot of things already, which is great. The other thing that
to build on what you were saying in your question earlier about hands-on, so one thing that is, while you may be doing things currently, and even getting your hands dirty and doing hands-on education, providing a narrative for people to understand how the activity they're doing is helping them is very useful. So if you take mathematics, for example. So you can learn arithmetic, the steps, right? But without a narrative laid on top of that, an understanding of why you're doing that, what's the purpose of doing that, then you don't really learn math.
Right.
You've only learned a part of it. So you need hands-on stuff, but you need to also have a narrative that kind of ties it together and connects it to the purposeful activity.
Definitely.
So I think in what you're saying, like the difference is that, so if you're doing early STEM education, early STEAM education, and you're using art, but tying all of that together in a purposeful way.
I was going to say, being more purposeful about it,
yeah,
absolutely.
that's the difference.
And I
Right.
think it's sometimes scary to hear at first, and you're thinking, now I have to change
But it
everything.
isn't
But
as
you don't have
scary.
to change everything. You just have to kind of fit it in where, you know,
Where it makes
that's kind of
sense.
my point. So it's
Yeah,
like,
so I was just
not-
trying to add
yeah.
to
No,
what
that
you're
makes
saying.
sense.
That yes, you have right.
Yeah.
It's not as scary because you know some of these skills, but tying together in the purposeful way is the thing that's challenging.
right. And it
I
just
think.
has to kind of be,
Yeah.
um,
So cool. Well, I think one thing that I always try to let educators know, especially because it is kind of overwhelming. It's like, wait, we come in a new standards, Common Core's
Oh,
here. You
man.
go from Common Core, you go back to
There's going to be
not,
next generation
right.
science standards coming out.
You know, and soon, you know, they're going to be asking kids to do everything digitally. You know, assessments, everything's going to be online. You know, how do we make sure they're prepared for that? How do we make sure that, are we doing thematic? Are we not doing thematic? You know, it changes every few years. You know, Common Core is pretty much thematic all over again, thematic teaching kind of thing. But one thing that I always, and the reason that I'm such a huge proponent of engineering education is because, you know, teachers are already engineers. When they're
Yeah.
in the classroom, they have to consider, you know, can I sit John
Oh.
beside Joe? Because I know that they're going to be there's this kind of, you know, concern. So that's this idea of systems thinking. This idea that, you know, if I make sure, because I know that Sally has an eye issue, and you know, but she can't afford glasses, because I'm engaged with what's happening in my students' families. You know, she has to sit closer to the board. You know, we're always being optimistic as teachers, because we have to come and try to at least come with a brand new face, no matter what's happened to us the day before, right? Even
It's
if
very interesting.
what do you mean?
That teachers are engineers already.
Yep.
And so engineering is just turning their practice. It's using their practice to inform their teaching.
That's right. Exactly.
It requires a level of self-reflection.
That's right. Which I think is necessary,
Yeah.
that I don't think a lot of teachers either give themselves,
Or
or
they may not have a community of learning. So they
Exactly.
So the first step is just building a community of learning for
Yeah.
themselves, pairing up with a teacher and talking about it.
That's right. And
As a
so
teacher.
for what I find is that when you're in areas, if you happen to be one of those many teachers that happen to feel as if they have to exist in a silo, they're by themselves trying to figure out their stuff all by themselves without a lot of help for either an administrator or a teammate, you know, you have Twitter. You know, Twitter has actually been, you know, signified as one of the, you know, educators kind of rock on Twitter because they really, you know, find out that that's the number one, you know, area to get a lot of resources, a ton of things done. Yeah. Have you used Twitter
Oh,
before? So, you know, those kind of things are always really cool to be able to tap into. We're nearing our end really soon, and so
Wow.
I know it's gone really fast. Now, are there, outside of those things that I addressed, if you're thinking about whether, you know, for family, for, you know, recreation, which I didn't talk too much about, you know, how are we having fun? How are we relieving stress or any of those things? What are some of those things that we may not have addressed in our conversation that you think are things that definitely matter, either for how we interact as a community, as a business owner, as a mom and educator? What might be some of those things that you would say matter the most to you as an individual, even?
well, just really quick, because it kind of goes along with another point that I know was one of your questions
Mhm.
farther up the line a little bit. But, and just being like, you know, how you're talking about parents maybe possibly being incarcerated or, you know, things like that.
Mhm.
And I was even thinking, well, there's so many parents too that do have to work and have and send their kids to daycare, things like that. So they're still not getting all that, interaction that they might want with their kids. So I think.
And then they get them at the end of the day when they're at their brightest and best, right?
but that's tough for any parent. So you figure there's ones that for whatever reason can't be there with their kids all day, and it's a lot to go to work and then come home and to interact. But I think that just making that time is so important. Just like we were talking about before. With Jane having a big vocabulary, I make an effort, and I'm lucky enough to be home with her. But we read together. She loves books, and I talk to her constantly. So I think just finding any little bit of time to talk, to read a book, to do something on the iPad, like you said, not just give them an iPad, but to sit with them and find a video you both like, talk about it.
That's what the current research suggests, that the way to ameliorate that like babysitting problem is just engage in technology and media with your kids and talk about it while it's happening.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I agree. I completely agree with you, and it's challenging. So for me, I started the business so I could interact with my kids more.
Right.
I was feeling disconnected from them, and I wanted to engage them, and I bring them along and test everything with them. I love it. It's I feel like starting a business is the way to live the American dream, because you are creating something from scratch that you see in the world, and that allows you to do what you're most passionate about.
Absolutely.
Now, you also have to then cater it to the market,
right,
which is where you have that tension. But yeah, I think purposeful interaction, and one thing Pittsburgh is just a amazing place for early childhood stuff. Although a lot of kids don't have access to it,
right,
those who do purposefully engage with what's there, there's so much to offer. All of the museums have great programming. The library has good programming. So it's the Sprout. Go to the Sprout Fund. Go to Remake Learning.
right.
They have a ton of resources available for you.
Yeah,
So-
definitely. Cool. Well, as these two have suggested and talked about, and I want to make sure I address, because I think my babies are watching. We do so much of what we do for you, for our kids, and me especially. Everything that I do, even though you're there with Nana right now, everything that I do with Iernwill, with Freedom Radio, is all for you, because we want to make sure that you have access, even while you're down there in Gaston, North Carolina. Making sure in that rural town that I came up with, where all our family is and everybody loves us so much, while you have that loving and supporting environment, and want to make sure that you have the kind of tools and resources that you need the most. And that's why Mommy's here doing this for you, and for everybody else that recognizes that there's a need to provide high quality education opportunities, because everyone deserves the opportunity to be competitive with the environment, with their leader globally, because we're such a global environment, community now. You're competing with someone in China for the same, potentially for the same job, and that's only going to change. That's only going to be more. The world is getting smaller, so that's only going to be more and more true that we're competing globally. But everybody deserves that opportunity, no matter what the demographics. And that's what Iernwill is really all about. Iernwill Education Consulting and Resource Advisory Services is about making sure that you have the resources available to you. Along the 2014 Iron Sharpens Iron Summit Tour, we're talking about making sure we're connecting with those people that, like these lovely two here in the studio with me today, that can kind of sharpen what I learned, what I know, and what I'm trying to understand, and as we grow together, saying, hey, no, that's not going to work. They very well may not be from the same background. I'm a rural, country girl, working poor, what I mean? That my family's from that environment. But I, unlike, Jordan, I kind of whizzed through school, what I mean? I didn't necessarily have to work as hard, which has some trade-offs, involved, and I was the youngest of my family. And so we kind of had this conversation before, and Jordan kind of put in perspective for me. He was like, oh, so, you were the hope, that your family expected you to be able to do it. You were the baby, so they also held you up on a pedestal. So you think the world revolves around you. Oh, well, yeah, kind of, sort of. A little bit.
We all do to some extent. Right?
Exactly. And so just to some extent, but also in doing that, and having that kind of, upbringing, I understood that there are things that are also to the person that is has so much, they have to give back that much more, and I want to be able. Iernwill is about giving back what I know, finding those people to be able to try to convince them, hey, if you hadn't thought about giving back because you're so awesome, I'm going to try to convince you to give back, and work with me to be able to share that resource that is just every other single individual in the world. And so as I've been doing, thinking about the grand challenges, I came up with 12. I also have been starting this idea, this 12 challenge. Okay, so this is my fitness challenge, though. So everybody has these whole these challenges and things like that. And so yesterday, I thought it was kind of a light day. It was just like 50 squats and 50 Supermans, and I think 25 sit-ups and 12 push-ups and like a 30-second plank. It was like, oh, this is easy. And
are you feeling it today?
I am. Just a little bit, lower back. But I'm going to continue to go, because I think that when it comes to wellness, when it comes to fitness, that, we can be changing how we feel with, 12 seconds of the day, just taking a deep breath, and really inhaling and taking that time. I think deep belly breathing is something that people don't really, deal with too much. And it's just like, oh, if you just took in some more oxygen, you feel so much better. Your cells will operate better. Your body operates better if you're breathing and taking deep breaths. And so, that's why they talk so much about fitness, because you're improving oxygen flow and so forth. So this 12 challenge, it's the idea of taking those 12 things that matter to you, like education, like stretching and breathing, like taking a 12-minute walk for lunch. You got 30 minutes, take 12 of that for lunch, or write 12 things about yourself that are beautiful. 12 minutes to pamper yourself. Take a longer shower, even though that's not probably good for the water. But take a little bit longer.
Just stand in the shower. 12 minutes.
Exactly. Yeah, so about that environment stuff again.
Well, no, turn the water off.
Right, and just stand there. That's right, stand in the cold for 12 minutes. But those kind of things.
It's good for your soul.
It is. It's perfect for your soul. No, but so these are the kind of things that I think we can use. Find 12 people and figure out what they know, or what their background is, or what their understanding is.
Why 12?
So the reason I did 12 was because my daughters they were able to make a bird feeder at Home Depot, and after the food ran out, I would get a knock on the window from a cardinal for about a week. It would just wake me up in the morning. So cardinals, think about this idea of cardinal, it typically represents like the number 12 months in a year, cardinal calendar, that type of thing. So because the cardinal have become such a pivotal part of my life, and I bought new food, I just put out new stuff today. They ate up all the last one. We have just bought red pepper food, and it attracted so many birds.
So you're announcing to the Cardinals that they can come now?
Yes, I did. And then I put more food out there today. I'm going to have to try to make a vegan one, because I bought this from Home Depot also, but it's like animal based, like it's animal fat. It's like, I don't know how that works. Sorry, birds. But I did post a recipe for vegan bird suet, or I don't know how to pronounce the word, SUET. Is that like French? I don't know. Is that I don't know. But I posted a vegan recipe on the website, on facebook.com/IERN.WILL. So make sure you're visiting us on Facebook. We're on Twitter at IERNWILL, one word, Iernwill. You can check us out there. You can always check out the blog, because that gives you all the updates, wordpress.com. So that's THEE, standing for the Holistic Engineering Education Path. So THEEPATH.wordpress.com. So you can figure out all our stuff and find what we have going on there. So, and follow me on my 12 challenge as I feed the birds. Soon I'll be able to roll that beautiful bird footage, and you'll be able to see all the wonderful birds interacting. Like, we had like 5 cardinals in a tree feeding each other. It was really touching. It's like, I don't have pets, but I can deal with birds outside the window.
Now you have birds.
I know, I have birds, like a bunch of them.
And at least you're not a bird lady too.
I know, it kind of works out, right? It kind of works. It's like in a fine balance, and this is what it's all about: finding that balance.
So can I plug our website?
Sure, absolutely, do that, please.
All right, so we are isa-pgh.com.
Yes, isapgh.com.
You actually can go to isapgh.com also. It redirects, but
yes,
we got the hyphen in there.
So yeah, I'm covering up Mary's face. I'm trying to put the logo in there. Let's see if this works.
And if you are an educator and you would, an early childhood educator, and you want to bring some of our programming to your institution, please shoot me an email. We're at Jordan, Jordan, like the basketball player or the country, at isapgh.com.
Yes,
isa-pgh.com.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Perfect. So before you go, we have 1 minute left, and I always ask everyone in the studio one question before they leave, and that question is, what does community mean to you? What is community? How do you define community? I'll give you some time to think about it. Because for us, community is an ecosystem, a working ecosystem that pretty much helps fuel the passions and the goals and the aspirations of those that are in it. And so we recognize that in order to be a sustainable and economically vital community, that we kind of have to create the opportunities that each of us need together. And so for us, it's an ecosystem.
Yeah, when I hear community, I think about families being together in public events. When I hear community, that's what I think about.
I think about just the word support, just supporting one another. Like you hear often everything's like eat local or do things, but it really is important to go to the coffee shop next door instead of like the big main chains or anything like that. Just supporting each other.
Yeah.
There's
Supporting
a lot of
local businesses.
Yeah, it's just a lot of because that's kind of like
lifeblood.
Yeah. So I always think of support. I think that's very important.
Family support.
I think of family,
awesome.
and Mary thinks of support, and you think of...
I think of ecosystem.
Ecosystem.
Yep.
You're more of a systems thinker.
Yeah, I am. Because I think everything is about, working together. I think it's really, really vital, especially, I think, and it may have a lot to do with the fact that I'm often in a place by myself, kind of moved to Pittsburgh by myself during college, connected with the, then have the babies here. And so, they're here. And so it's usually just me and them when they're here. Now they're with Nana, and it's just like, oh, I need support, a new family. I have to kind of I have to create my family here, and so that's pretty much what I've had to do. And a lot of my opportunities, worked with Earth and Vegetables Outreach, which is a church-based kind of after-school program, and they had really become kind of the family here in the area. So they have become my community. That spanned up into last year when I came back, so all those things, even though I left in 2009, when I came back, that family, that unit, that support was still there. And so absolutely, and those are where those resources come from. Hey, you should try this, hey, you should work this out, that out, and so yes, definitely. So thank you so much for visiting Freedom Radio. It was awesome having you. See you later. Awesome. So this is cool. I'm gonna stop this right